Welcome to the New Property Show. I'm Steve McManaman. This show is our first panel special, Wealth Creation and Investing in Properties Outside of Victoria. Our panel of experts are from accounting, legal, mortgage, and finance brokerage, and we'll discuss issues such as builder quotes, wealth creation, and investing in properties outside Victoria. Typically, the closer you are to the builder, so let's say a proximity of 30 to 50 kilometres, the more control you have. So therefore, if I was buying locally, what I would do is go and visit the builder, go past the sites, go to the land, look at the infrastructure, look at that, okay? And I would then probably do more of the handover stuff like the fences, the landscaping, the blinds, cooling, and I'd deal with a volume builder. If I went further outside the state, I'd probably want to do less work, and what I'd be looking for then would be builders that do more of the work. So these are known as full turnkey packages. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. So it is a tough question. Do you think you're paying too much for these full turnkey packages for everything done for you? Or would you still work with a volume builder and risk it and try and get your trades afterwards?
I would say that the full turnkey packages are still good, especially if you're an investor, because you don't have time to go and meet the builder. You would rather make more money out of investing that time into your own business and what you're expert at. So according to me, I just want the key, rent it out straight away rather than wasting time on, because the more time you invest in finding the builder, buying the land, waiting for the settlement, you'll pay more interest on it. You might be better off paying someone else and find the right property for you.
So speed and efficiency is key for you.
That's what.
Excellent. Rebecca, what are your thoughts on my solution? Would you be full turnkey versus do it yourself?
I think full turnkey or do it yourself really comes down to the individual again. Turnkey is amazing, done for you, but I think it's really important to unpack the finer detail for price. They're not all equal. A lot of the time when people are new to the investment game, they do love the idea of turnkey, everything done, but yeah, just do your research still because the price does vary from one option to the other.
Excellent answer. Okay, over this way.
Couldn't agree more with Rebecca, but it's also the fine print. Make sure if it's a turnkey, the fine print, the specifications are there, your liquidate damages, if they're late, how much they're paying you, it's all spelled out in your contract.
And yourself, Kerry?
Yes, I'm going to say full turnkey. The less that I have to do, the better.
Yeah.
I can picture your landscaping.
Excellent. So guys, I want to thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Just before we wrap up, what advice would you give a first-time investor for their first step? What should they do? They've got a $50,000 deposit. What's that one tip that you would give?
If they have $50,000 deposit, they should actually go for land and construction because that would give them some more time to save more and also pay half the stamp duty. The main point is if you have less saving, you need to find ways where you can invest with that amount, as simple as that.
Excellent. Kerry?
I'm going to throw a little bit of a curly one out here, and this is general advice, but I started my property investing journey by using mortgage insurance, which means I put in less deposit and borrowed more money. And for the right person with the right risk profile, I'm going to say, borrow maybe 90% rather than 80% and get in faster and be able to replicate it and do it again.
I like your answer.
Get your paperwork looked at. Make sure you don't sign anything without someone looking at it. Contracts are big. If you do house and land, make sure your sunset clauses are covered, what you can do during the construction period as well. The building contracts are so important with specifications, liquidate damages. It's the foundation of what you do.
And Rebecca?
So you've got 50,000. I would say have a mini celebration because that's a goal in itself, but I wouldn't...
And don't blow it.
Yeah, don't do online shopping. I would still just sit on it briefly while you do your research. Like we touched on that online exploring initial options. I would definitely start there because then you won't feel that pressure and you've got 50,000 there, you feel like you're ready to go. You don't want to have that first conversation and be paying a deposit. So I'd celebrate the small win, start planning, do your research and then take it from there.
Excellent. I'll give my answer. I'd probably buy the land first, lock something in, know that it's secure, then shop my builder and go to as many display homes, to as much online and make sure I'm confident before proceeding. I think property is a long-term game. I don't think as much as we speak about speed and efficiency. I think taking extra 30 to 60 days to get the right decision, making the right decision, is probably the most important advice that I would give. I want to thank you guys for joining us on the panel again tonight, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
So tonight's topic is, I guess, hot on everyone's mind, which is wealth creation. What are the tips and tricks, and what would you do to create a property portfolio beyond 1 to 2 properties? So over to the panel.
Am I starting? Cool. How long do we have? Wealth creation. Look, if you're going to create wealth with your first acquisition, or any acquisition, should be really calculated, and you need to add wealth to it, add value to it. So whatever you're buying should be looking at a 3 to 5 year plan to how is this going to increase in value. One way could be to buy land and build on it. That will increase the value immediately. Another could be buying existing property and renovating it, or buying something and subdividing it.
Okay, so you're going with 3 types of creating wealth. You're looking at 3 to 5 year plans, so not short-term flips, which is good. So that's a more of a structured approach, which I guess I'd expect from you, because it's more calculated. It's a step-by-step, and I think time in the market, obviously we've spoken about that before, is key. Maybe over to you guys over here to the left.
Yeah, so for me, I think this has changed a little bit since a lot of the regulations have come in and interest rates have increased. It's much harder to hold several properties on a normal income. So I would be focusing on increasing your personal income, because then the bank will lend you more money. But also now we're seeing, like you said, Rex, adding value, and it might be that you need to sell and re-enter the market in another state or territory, which isn't ideal. 10 years ago we would have said hold, but now borrowing capacities are really capped, so it might be that you take some of the equity that you've built and then reinvest it.
Can I just challenge you on that for a second? Have you, what I've seen sometimes is people have relocated. Have you ever people that have sold $1 million property, downsize their lifestyle to increase their wealth? For example, they've sold $1 million property, gone back into a $500,000 property, and then reinvested to create wealth. Has that come across you as a broker before? Have you seen people starting to downsize to reinvest?
Normally, people are building wealth when they're young, and as they get older, the lifestyle creep does happen. But I'm more talking about people who've got their existing place, and then they're investing, so it's an unemotional asset. They don't need to hold it. If it has, like Melbourne, Sydney, the last few years, if it goes up 30-40%, you can sell it when the market's really hot, and then go to a softer market such as Adelaide, Queensland, etc., where it hasn't really gone quite as big, and then reinvest it there. So we don't see people downsize to do that. They keep their family home and then they invest around that.
Okay, so sometimes there is the right time to sell. So if you're getting over the odds for your dollar, definitely sell and reinvest it and buy back in, because it is about turnover, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes, unless your income can support holding that, then purchase another one. There's no point in having 600 grand equity and the bank won't lend you another $1, right?
I like it. Mina, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to be biased and say start your own business and then use the money from that business, which you control, right?
Increase your income.
Invest in, increase your income, because business you can get a return on investment of 10-35%, depending on what industry you're in, so on and so forth, okay? And then from there, invest in other asset classes. So business itself is an asset, right? Then you've got property, as we mentioned previously, you've got bonds, shares, so on and so forth.
So only using property, I guess, is one forte for wealth creation. I guess we do talk a lot about bricks and mortar, but really you're going back to the individual and really just creating protection around yourself. So how would people go about starting a business? So if they're employed now, what are the benefits, just to change lanes just for a second, to actually start your business?
The benefits of starting your own business is you are largely in control of driving that business. You get to decide and call the shots. And it's not easy to start your own business, but it's well worth it because you reap the rewards of that business.
Could also be an asset too that you could sell down the track as well.
100%, but you have to make sure that you're actually establishing an asset. And one way to do that is to make sure you've got systems, policies, and procedures in your business, and that your business can be potentially standalone from you. Otherwise, you don't have a business. You've just purchased yourself a job.
Kerry, so you're dealing, I guess, in some bigger developments. I'd like to look at this question both from a point of view of a young version of yourself and obviously as you sit there now. So what would you do to build wealth and a property portfolio?
I'm gonna say I agree with what you were saying there in regards to buying assets which have the potential to subdivide, create that equity, do purchase and assets in, say, entities where there's potential for borrowings outside of the normal regulations. That's what we're seeing a lot of. That's really important these days if you really want to get ahead.
Okay. I'm going to throw a legal question in here. So hopefully the accountant and the lawyer can battle this one out. Okay, so you've got 5 properties. They're in your own name.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. You're driving a bit quickly. You're working a hectic lifestyle. Your spending's a bit out of control, but you want to buy more properties. What should you do next? What's your next step? So it's all held in your own name. Do you think that's a wise idea to hold property in your own name, or would you start talking companies, trusts? What would we do next?
Really depends on the individual. So if you hold properties in your own name and you're a surgeon, probably a great idea because you negative gear it. If you're a business owner, probably not a good idea because you've got risk. So it really depends on the individual person's circumstances and what their tax circumstances are as well.
What about you, Mina?
I would disagree with that. And one of the reasons is something that you actually previously mentioned, Rex, which is the 50% capital gains tax discount. So looking at the capital aspect of it, if we put it in something like a trust, say a surgeon, they can potentially split that between other beneficiaries, right? We've got to be careful here because the ATO is targeting this type of thing where it's not a normal family arrangement, but everyone is separate and individual, and you've got to look at their circumstances. But ultimately, one thing I would actually go back and say is, why is their spending out of control? So we need to look at the individual, make sure the habits are correct, and then go from there. If they need to sell, say, 1 or 2 properties just to make sure everything's under control, and then go back and build from that, that's something that I'd say would be wise to do.
I think the important part there is to educate yourself as building wealth, because if you're starting there with $1 million mindset and suddenly you're holding $5 million worth of property, you need to have a $5 million mindset. So what are some of the key strategies you would take there to increase your knowledge so you know what to do next? So what does a person with a $5 million asset have mindset over a $1 million mindset have? What's the difference between someone worth $5 million and $1 million?
They've got better advisors, they've probably got trusts set up and better structures in place for asset protection, income distribution, capital gains tax savings. So there's ways to work within the framework of the accounting and legal system to protect yourself.
So working with a team.
Working with a team, a good team.
And Kerry, you've done a lot of developments. Would you like to talk to us about land development and what that looks like for people that are wanting to buy acreage? So now you're a sophisticated investor. We want to build wealth through property. What's the next steps to become a developer? What do you need to do? What's some of the basics there you need to cover before doing your first subdivision?
Well, I think there's a lot of research that you have to go into. You have to know exactly, I think, what the outcome is that you want. And like, for example, one of the developments I'm doing in Daylesford at the moment, we bought a great block of land. I've got 2 people, one is family and one's non-family, and they're the only 2 people that I would actually go into syndicates with. So one thing is if you can't do it by yourself, because you may need some other people to do it with you, know the people that you're going into bed with.
Excellent.
Can I jump in there with your syndicates? And I think it's a great idea. Make sure your syndicate's structured properly. Make sure you've got an agreement with your syndicate partners.
Yes. So
if someone wants to sell out, what's the procedure? If someone, how do you distribute profits? It's all spelt out. Your rule book is there from day one, because things can go wrong really quickly. Or it's not normally because of bad intentions, it's misunderstandings.
Yeah, I would 100% agree.
What about, let's throw the word out there, FISO. So feasibility studies, is that something you've come across before? Have you ever done a feasibility study, Mina, with your clientele, or would you go to where would people go to source out the costs of actually doing a development, who would you advise they go to?
I would advise that they go to a builder, right, or someone like yourself, Steve,
Yep.
or a buyer's advocate.
What about in land? If they're doing land only,
Yeah.
and they need to work at the cost of sewerage, water, gas,
Yeah.
and well, don't expect you to always to answer these, but I would like to know from an accountant's point of view.
Yeah.
Is there somebody that you know in your team that you would actually recommend them to do a feasibility study? Because there's a lot of costs. There could be millions of dollars that add up there. So who would you recommend?
Well, people like property surveyors,
Mhm.
land surveyors, right? They would be able to ascertain what the costs are, and they'd be best advised to actually provide you with that information.
Perfect. So the thing that we've also discussed here is really sort of staying in your lane. So I think personally with building wealth through property, it's a step-by-step process. Each move would need to be calculated, strategic, a 5-year investment. Some of us want to flip properties quickly, which I think you're selling when they're high. You're trying to hold on as many properties as you can to and looking at long-term. What do you think the average person would do nowadays? Should they be flipping properties and paying tax, or should they just be slow and steady wins the race?
Well, I think what I'm going to say is, and I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but you mentioned the fact that borrowing capacity is really, really tough.
Yep.
So I think a mixture of both,
Yep.
some hold, and then also have a bucket over here where you're just turning over.
Yep. I would love it if everyone could hold 10 properties, but it's just very hard these days. So there is a point where kind of take some equity and then use it to push myself forward rather than wait for another 5 years, 10 years until the cycle happens again in one state.
So 2 steps forward, 1 back, but sometimes to re-enter.
Exactly.
Excellent. Great answer.
Especially if you can use that equity to pay down your principal place of residence, and then
We're going to cover a very quick topic that's sort of come in and it's been on everyone's mind. So down here in Victoria, I personally think property prices are sitting near their peak. And people have been asking me, where would you invest outside of Victoria and why?
I'm going to say Queensland, South Australia, but personally, I prefer Queensland. There's a lot of investment, infrastructure-wise, and the property prices are increasing in value.
Excellent.
And people are moving from Victoria to Queensland.
Yep. Net migration, we've seen it a lot during COVID. Those numbers have dropped a little bit, but even in the last quarter, Melbourne and Sydney still recorded negative net migration, whereas Queensland was positive. Infrastructure spending, as you said, a lot of work being done on the Olympics, which always confuses me why we spend so much on that. But the transport, etc., it's really being built up. So I would say Queensland or South Australia if you want like more of a slower burn. It doesn't have those peaks and troughs, but just very slow and steady.
Consistent. Okay. Over here.
Queensland would have been my choice about 6 months ago or less,
Yep.
but with the floods and I think prices are going up a bit there as well, I'd probably go South Australia.
It's been in the South Australia has been a lot of talk. Low vacancy rates. There's a lot of money being spent over there, and you can get a lot of house and land and apartment for under $500,000 there. So typically, I guess my first home buyers, second home buyers, or investors are looking at those areas and they're relocating because they've got quality of lifestyle. They're close to beaches. Actually, quite close to the city. If you're building in South Australia, in for example Melbourne, what we look at is we might go out to the southeastern suburbs. And we're still paying a premium of 600, 700,000, and we're driving an hour and 20 every day on our beautiful freeways. So, okay, what about you, Kerry?
Well, I think I'm going to, what's the right word? I'm going to be biased here because I'm from South Australia. Originally, I was born there. So, if you know Adelaide pretty well, you can't go very far to the west. You can't go very far to the east. So you've only got the south and the north. So. The infrastructure, the roads, it's growing at a really fast pace. And there's also a lot of investment and a lot of overseas companies that are actually coming in and setting up, doing projects in South Australia. So I think that, if you read between the lines, then there's a lot of opportunity there for, people that need to rent from investors.
Perfect.
So that would be my pick.
I'm probably always leaning, I guess, towards, Queensland. And that might be some of those areas like Logan, Toowoomba, Ipswich, and then you're going up north towards Townsville. But some of those reasons is really just due very low vacancy rate. I think that's a key when looking for an investment property. There's 20 to 30 applications per property up there. There is a lot of money going up there, but I do agree that the land prices and the build prices are getting a bit more expensive. Some of the other places that we do see a little bit of traction is actually over in Perth. So what seems to happen is that, as I said, there's a word called recession, there's called the economy slowing down, there's a lot of media spin. I know we're on media. But what happens there is, I guess when the rest of the states are going up, Perth's kind of sitting there. But as Australia, if it goes through any difficult times, the resources boom really sort of comes through as well. So a bit of a seesaw effect. The only disadvantage would be the time spent. So if you need to go see your property, I think that also should be in consideration. So I think visiting a property is important. So with that said, if you did invest in the states that we've discussed, how often would you go and check out your property? Would you get
Never.
over there once a year, or would you
No.
not even see it at all?
No,
Yeah.
get someone else to do it.
Well,
Let's have an expert do it.
yeah, well, while it was tax deductible, you probably go often. Now not so much.
I thought they changed those rules.
They have, yeah. So
Yeah.
now you
Oh,
can't
yeah,
claim
exactly. So
because
now-
people were abusing it.
Yeah.
And it's leased, so you really can't knock on the tenant's door and go, hey, I want to look at my property.
And just another thing with the Perth, Queensland, where the yields are really appreciating. So from a finance point of view, you're able to much easily hold those assets for a longer time, which gives you time to really get that capital growth because the rents are going up all the time.
There is another topic too that that people don't often talk about, and obviously I'll focus on house and land, but let's just open it up just for a quick 10 seconds. If you could buy an apartment for $260,000 and it was renting at $350 a week, would you do that deal?
What's the capital growth in the apartment?
3%. That's a great
Yeah.
question.
So
Good
like
counter.
there's
Yes.
there's just not enough information. Maybe I love apartments like in the UK and Europe. It's very normal, but in Australia you don't seem to like them as much, so that you don't really get the growth, which yield can only take you so far. What's the point in making $5,000 when you can make 50 on something else?
Fantastic answer, Ian. I'm actually very, very impressed with that. I would agree with you totally.
Yep.
It's that short-term gratification where you think a deal's too good to be true.
Yep.
Typically is. Yourself, Mina, what would you think there?
I'm going to say focus more on capital growth,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, you need to look at your cash flow position and make sure that you're looking after yourself.
And you guys?
Make sure it's not a service apartment, or if it's a service apartment, make sure you've got a long lease in place.
Excellent. And yourself?
And capital growth and cash flow together.
Okay. I have found, with an answer to that, though I have found another strategy that's come up quite often. I'm going to discuss this in further episodes, but Airbnb is really starting to get on everyone's radar. Sometimes you can buy a property that's $260,000, for example, up in Queensland, and you might Airbnb the thing for $200 a night. It can give you a return of sort of $1,200 to $1,400 a night. It's more just thinking about outside of how rehash a deal. When we've spoken about wealth creation, there's many ways to create wealth out of existing property. Guys, any closing thoughts before we go? So the state for you is?
South Australia.
South
And-
Australia.
Queensland.
I would speak to an advisor and they would tell me South Australia or Queensland. I'm agnostic. I will invest wherever my money will make money.
Perfect. Well, I'm Queensland. Queensland wins. Thank you. That's all for this week. Next week, our panel will discuss how to get into the market even with a small amount to invest. See you then.